So why do we need to do surveys? We know we've got resistance. Why bother about doing surveys when we know it's there? They provide a more accurate result for the incidents, because we're not just those people like you that are here because you've got a concern about it. We're going into paddocks that may be cropped 1 in 10 years, 1 in 15. We're even at the moment doing pasture paddocks if we think they're arable. So we're getting a real accurate result of what's there. We can show differences between regions and states, which we can't really from testing services. And because we're repeating these surveys every 5 years, we can show how the incidence over that 5-year period has changed with the repeated surveys. So what's the status? Little bit of quick reverse engineering from Michelle Owen's paper and Peter Batsalis' combined with mine. Australia-wide, 64% of paddocks that are capable of being cropped that have been surveyed are resistant to the fops. So 2/3. The DIMs, we tend to use clethodim, get the best case scenario at 17%, SUs 63, IMIs that not everybody does. I'm the only one that's doing the IMIs at the moment. Trifluoralin, it's about 17, and Group M, it's 5. And we've done in the latest surveys, that the dates are up there, we've surveyed just over 2,000 paddocks Australia-wide. So where do we look at New South Wales, which is what we're interested in, over that time period, and you're the first people to see these results from last year's survey. They were entered in last Monday. We're fairly similar to that Australia-wide. Lower than Western Australia, but higher than the other states. So where do we survey in New South Wales? That's the paddocks we've visited since 2010. Anybody south of Wagga this year, we will be driving around your part of the country and trespassing on your property. We will be jumping fences to get in to take samples because it's your turn. We do 150 paddocks each year. Although last year, because we had to do the northern part of the state, we did 400. So at the end of the period, we're a little bit worn out. So how do these regions vary? So there we are within New South Wales. Like New South Wales, 64% overall with the fops. In the slopes, so basically the slopes we consider north of the Sturt Highway, east of the Newell, west of the Hume Olympics, somewhere around there. So it's 90% to the fops, 70 to the SUs, 25% to trifluoralin. So we're talking the Western Australian numbers there. The other one we'll go for here, the plains is west of the Newell and north of the Sturt. At the bottom is the number of ryegrass samples we've got and the numbers of percentage. So plains we did last year, so that's 2016 data. 71% and about half to the fops. And higher rainfall, so east of the Hume or east of the Olympic, depending where we are. And the south will be higher because that's from the 2010-2013 surveys when they were part of the slopes and the plains. What we will do notice is the north, so north of Dubbo, was surveyed for the first time ever this year, and while it's lower in the selectives, it's much higher in the knockdowns. So we look at that, we've got there was a resistance. What's that mean to cross or multiple resistance in the ryegrass? So of those samples, just under 500 have been tested to those 5 herbicides, FOP, a DIM, an SU and an IMI. And of those, 121 were susceptible to all of them. So that's the good news. What you look at the other end is 8 of those samples. So what's that about? A couple of percent were resistant to all 5 of those selective herbicides. And nearly half of them were resistant to 3 or more of those herbicide groups. And that again varies within the regions. So the slopes and the south, a lot more cross and multiple resistance to 3, 4 or 5 groups, whereas the north and the west, a lot less of that to the selectives. The west being the lowest, we went right out to Mildura. So that's giving you variation between regions. What I can say with that, while it's 3% overall for New South Wales for Roundup resistance and 5% Australia-wide, 16% of the samples I received this year for the testing service were resistant to glyphosate. And we had 2 more samples resistant to paraquat. So it's out there, it's just when they're low numbers, they're a bit harder to find in the surveys. So what about the other species? This is just ryegrass. Oh, so we're talking clethodim and other dims. We know there's a difference. These are the surveys where we've tested both of them. So we know there are differences, so you get that extra chance with the clethodim and factor as well, batroxydim on the other compared to the other dims. So we know that. So that's just numbers of samples that are tested to both. And we look at changes over time. So New South Wales slopes, we've done 3 surveys, 1991, before I was here, 2007 and 2013, and Southern New South Wales, same years. And we can see there was a rapid increase with the longer time. So we're getting this roughly similar increases as we go on an annual basis, and we'd expect this, it looks the same for the plains from 2010 to 2016, so we'll get that difference. So other species, there's our number 2 weed species in this part of New South Wales anyway. Overall 37%, so over a third of the wild oats are resistant to the fops, about 7% to the SUs. And it varies a bit across, but it's a bit more consistent. The west is a bit lower. Haven't done the northern ones yet. I'm waiting for next year so they'll germinate a bit better. We've surveyed the one big survey for 1 year. Minimal resistance to J and M, or no resistance to J and M, and none to clethodim as well, so that's good news. But we do have the changes over time. 1991 survey, 2007, 2013. The increases, that's the number of samples tested to each is the number and percentage populations resistant. So, you know, we're up, it's gone from 5% resistant to the fops, so that's fops only, in the slopes in 91, to under 40% in 2007, and then a further increase to just under 60%. Last survey we did in 2013. So what other species we tested? We test barley grass, slopes 42, resistance to the SUs and paraquat. So it's out there for the other species. In the higher rainfall, so getting right till we run out of crop in country. We just drive till we don't see a crop anymore, then drive another 10k, turn around and come back. SUs, and out in the west, 48, so fops 2%, SUs 9. The brome grass out in the west, probably as Rick alluded to, a bit more of a major problem, so they're targeting it a bit more. Resistance to the fops, SUs and IMIs, whereas none were resistant on the slopes and in the higher rainfall regions. The wild radish, compared to Western Australia, we don't have the radish problem. In the 150 paddocks we surveyed last year at harvest time, we found it in 6 or 7 paddocks. And that's a normal sort of number. So we don't have the numbers to deal with, but we also don't have the resistance levels that the Western Australians have, so that's, we hope, a good thing. We hope we're not breeding them up for them to explode in a hurry. But it looks like, so we've got resistance to Bs, so SUs and IMIs, Cs and Fs, but in a testing service basis, nothing to I and M, or in a survey, nothing to I and M yet, but we've had Is with the testing service. That's probably the most common broadleaf weed we find in the surveys. I think last year, of the 150 paddocks, we got just 111 ryegrass samples and 35 sow thistle samples. So it's the third biggest weed we collect in most of our surveys. So for New South Wales, half of the populations are resistant to the SUs of the sow thistle. We've had a couple of populations resistant to group I's and nothing to M yet. So we're there. It's probably our number one broadleaf. The problem with radish, with the sow thistle compared to a lot of the others, is you can do the very best job and then you import it just on a wind event. So whereas the others, you're in control of your destiny, in this one, there's a bit more problematic in it. And Indian hedge mustard is the other one we collect. So we've got resistance to the SUs and a bit of resistance to group I in that. So we tend to get as much of that in the surveys as we do wild radish, just what we find. So what have they told us overall? Fairly quick summary. Very high levels of fops and bees in the ryegrass. Nothing unusual about that, it just varies a bit within the regions. And even down when we go into sub-regions of those surveyed regions, we can see variability in that. And a lot of it comes back to cropping intensity and how hard they're pushing that system as well. High levels of fop resistance in the wild oats and SU resistance in the sow thistle. We found resistance in all those species we test. While we're doing that, we're also doing a weed survey. So when we're out there, we're monitoring what density the weeds are and what other weeds are there. So we're looking for the next ones that are going to, if you work to, as is everybody's aim, to reduce the number of ryegrass that you've got in the crop, nature will fill that vacuum with something. So we're looking at what is going to be next and how much it is. It will happen. What I'll say, I'll go back to the testing service results to answer that. With our testing service, our FOP resistance and our SU resistance is 90% every year. But every year we receive samples from postcodes we've never received them from before at a level between 5 and 10% of the postcodes are new every year. So what we're seeing is it's developing in those regions. So it's a bit like a donut shape. We think it's spreading out, so it's developing there. It'll be, even in those higher surveyed areas, there are pockets there that it's not as arable or not as good that develop slower anyway. So it comes back to cropping intensity, number of shots, and all those sorts of things. So they're going to, if you're less intense cropping, it's going to develop slower because you've put less herbicide on it.
Okay, more questions?
I haven't collected any fleabane. The Department of Ag people are doing that. Eric, any numbers? Yeah, so yes, it's out there. It's probably because we're dealing with greater numbers than we have previous years, so we're starting to put selection pressure on it.
That's a big number, 95% of fleabane glyphosate resistant. Righto, that's our mission control.
Summer cropping situation.
Thanks, Eric. There was another one.
Yeah, Phil. Yeah, we haven't done ryegrass on the roadsides. We've done the summer weeds on the ryegrass on the roadside. We didn't find any resistance to all those others. I can guarantee that if I get a sample of ryegrass sent in to me by a council or somebody consulting for a council to the testing service, I don't know how many I am from them at the moment, but I'm 100% on resistant to something, and I think it's about 90% to Roundup. What we did with the last survey was we did samples roadside, fence line, paddock whenever we stopped, just to look at what weeds were moving either way and see if we got any resistance. But that was all summer weeds, so those opportunity ones, you know, on the summer rainfall. We haven't done a ryegrass survey on roadsides yet.
I might just make two little comments there.